Hello, wildlings. I'm your Creepsmith, and you found my Fear Forge. Lucky you. Good evening, wildlings. We've gone over before how it's a good idea to learn from the past, but to realize that you'll never escape it. Hopefully, your past won't be as crazy or as evil as the one following this poor schmuck. Continuing on from last time, to my old 4th grade classmates in Mrs. Barther's biology class, Burn the Letters by BadFakeSmiles. She was dying. This sick bitch was dying. Well, according to her and her nurse. I don't know how she got my number, but she was able to call me. And her last request? To see her angels once again before she passed away. I was in a strange position. I honestly didn't know what to do or what to feel. I had shivers down my spine just hearing her call me by that nickname, but then again, she's a dying old lady who never had any children, and the closest thing she had was us. So, I posted and tried to call out to you guys. To my classmates in Class B2 of Oaks Elementary School, I bring to you news that our former biology teacher, Mrs. Barther, is sick and her chances of surviving aren't all that favorable. She told me her only wish is to see us again. If you'd like to join me, please respond below. I waited for anyone to respond, even if only one, to come with me to the hospital. Can't say I was surprised that no one replied. I spent hours and hours contemplating if I should go or not, paced around my room, biting my nails as I think about other alternatives like sending flowers or a fruit basket, but then some random thought about her ghost haunting me would pop inside my head, further convincing me to go. I was having second thoughts on whether the events that happened back in 4th grade were as terrible as I remembered them, that maybe I was just being too harsh on the old lady. With these things considered, I decided to go. It was noon. Entering the facility's sliding doors, the floor was glossy, but barely white anymore. The same goes for the walls that were beige in hue now. The stenches of disinfectants and molds were dancing in the air. The lobby had a few potted plants, but was barely alive, almost like the patients who were roaming around with their wheelchairs and their dexterous. I approached the nurse's station and asked for her room. The nurse that attended to me had porcelain fair skin with bright red lips, although the dark circles in her eyes either suggested that she was tired or a frequent smoker. I couldn't knock on room 612. I stood there for a good 5 minutes, trying to bite the skin off my lips. I didn't know what to expect. My mind was conjuring up scenario after scenario. I wondered what she would look like. Would she be weakly? Would she be alive and well, and all of this was a meticulous plan to kill me? The same nurse, red lips, tapped me from behind. Go on. She's been waiting ages for you guys. None of her previous calls came. That was my answer. I had to knock. Come in. A frail voice came from the other side. I'm not sure why the scene that greeted me after opening the door shocked me. The windows were open wide and silken curtains were dancing as the sunlight entered the white room. On the window sat a beautiful tulip, purple, like the color that she once wore, and on the bed, with sheets decorated in small blue polka dots, was an old lady. Her eyes were still just as big, but had a more gentle stare now. Her gray hair was flowing to her shoulders, and her smile was pure, excited but touched. Than? The soft voice felt like it finally belonged to her. Her eyes started to shimmer, brought to tears that came streaming down her face. I approached her awkwardly, and, "How are you, Mrs. Barther?" escaped my lips so naturally. I found myself rid of the terrifying image of her in my past. I sat down beside her. She made me talk about my life after the 4th grade, my life in high school and college. It didn't feel invasive or anything. It felt like feeding a mother's desire to reconnect to her son. I felt her genuinely being proud and happy for me through every beat of my story. When I figured that no one would come see me, I decided to write letters to my angels instead. "Letters?" I asked. "Yes, here. I figured I'd hand it to you in person since you were coming. I sent everyone else the same thing." She produced a white envelope from inside her pillowcase. It had slight creases and a couple of coffee stains on one side. Well, I hope it was coffee. I stayed and chatted with Mrs. Barther for quite some time. We were even laughing at some point. For a moment, my heart was filled with closure and forgiveness, even if we never brought up the things that happened in class. Red Lips knocked on the door and reminded me that visiting hours were almost over. Surprised, I looked at my phone. 8:34 p.m. I got up, said my goodbyes, grabbed the letter, and took it with me. When I got outside the room, I felt like I was crossing to another dimension. I wasn't covered with warm, moldy beige, but instead the hallways were dark, almost to the tint of green. There were lights on the ceiling, but there'd be at least 1 or 2 broken ones about every 6 feet. I felt like I had to take a piss first before leaving, so I looked up for signs of a comfort room. I walked down the hallway alone. Or so I thought. I didn't get that far before I started to hear footsteps slapping on the tiles. I looked behind me only to stare at a long black abyss. I continued walking, my steps slightly sped up, but the footsteps got faster as well, almost running. They sounded bare, like wet feet hitting bathroom tiles. I tried to ignore it, but I heard it come closer. It was approaching me. I looked behind me with fists clenched this time, and there she was. Standing just beneath a flickering light was Mrs. Barther, naked, covering her face. Her skin sagged all over her body, her gray hair flowing down to her waist now. I didn't need to see her covered face to know that she was chuckling. Her moving shoulders gave it away again. I refused to believe the terrifying figure that was in front of me, so I closed my eyes as tight as I could. "Go away, go away," I whispered to myself. And as I loosened the muscles on my eyelids, slowly opening them, there was no one. I breathed a sigh of relief and I continued to the comfort room. While inside, flashes of what happened to me back in the 4th grade appeared in front of my eyes. Her sunken eyes, her sickening smile filled with thousands of teeth, when suddenly I heard the front door of the comfort room creak open. It was a familiar sound. It was a familiar situation, and my heart started pounding. I started hyperventilating. I looked at where the sound was coming from, only to see the door slightly opened. A bony, saggy arm came inside and reached for the light switch. Suddenly, everything was pitch black. I panicked. My hands were feeling for the cubicle door. I carefully stepped and tried to navigate inside the dark bathroom. I slipped on the grimy tiles. When I found an empty cubicle, I locked myself inside. I pulled out my phone to turn on the flashlight, looking up and down for any sign of her. That's when the door to the cubicle on my right closed. I'd had enough. I wasn't going to wait for my eyes to see her, so I shouted at the top of my lungs for help, banging on the door with my eyes closed. I felt the world closing in around me, and I was fearing for my life. And then suddenly the light switched on. "Sir? Is everything all right, sir?" a man shouted from the comfort room door. I I got out of the cubicle almost hugging the janitor that had saved my life. The world around me was spinning. The fear had gotten into my head. I rushed out of the bathroom and ran to the nurse's station. Barther. I tried to catch my breath. Is everything all right, sir? Please calm down. Red Lips got out of the station, held my arms, and led me to a chair. Veronica Barther. She's outside her room. She's not sick. I rambled on and on. I'm sorry, sir? I asked her to come with me to Miss Barther's room. Sir, you can't just storm inside her room. She stopped my hand as I reached for the handle. She knocked 3 times before gently opening the door. She wasn't there. The crazy old bitch wasn't there. I looked at Red Lips' reaction, checking for validity that I wasn't the only one who was going crazy. So, where is she? I raised my voice. That's when I felt arms wrap around my torso, thin as twigs. I felt warm air on the back of my neck. Gotcha then. Gotcha. She hopped on and rode my back. In a panic, I tried to shake her off me. I felt her disgusting hands grab a feel of my chest as she laughed like an old hag. Get her off me! Get her off me! I shouted. The walls felt like they were closing in, and both the nurse and Mrs. Barther's voices were getting muffled. My head was aching, and I was finding it harder and harder to breathe. The nurse was finally able to pry her off me. I dropped to the floor, catching my breath, grabbing a hold of my sanity again. The nurse was in as much of a shock as I was. She carefully assisted Mrs. Barther back to her bed with a very confused face. When I got my bearings, anger soon started creeping in. She didn't have any right to humiliate me like that. Not anymore. My hands were still shaking, but I asked her for a reason why she was doing this. I was just trying to play with you again, Than. Just like we used to. She smiled at me. Her eyes reverted back to being wide and sunken. That insane and deranged look of hers was once again present. Her soft voice couldn't fool me again. You have to forgive me, it's just... Her voice began to change, cracking, stuttering. I've always wanted kids, and you were the closest ones I had. I looked at her eyes and found them full of tears again. I mean, ma'am, I get that, but... If only I was just a couple years younger, she interrupted me. I would let you fuck me. Silence blanketed the room. We simply stared at each other. What? I said I would have let you fuck me. You and all your classmates, so I could have angels of my own. A sickening, salivating smile painted itself across her face. My stomach was in shambles. I felt as if my gut wanted to throw itself out of my mouth. The nurse was equally mortified from what she'd just said, but then she laughed. She laughed like a hyena. I stormed out of the room and the hospital and drove home. As soon as I got inside the house, I chugged down a bottle of beer and opened another just as quickly. I felt the need to put alcohol into my system to flush out the poison. The feeling of fear and disgust wrapped around my body like a snake squeezing the life out of me. I wanted to claw my skin off, wanted to bang my head against the wall. I paced around my living room, shouting, screaming, desperate to get it all out. Then I remembered the letter. I grabbed the envelope and gripped it tightly, tore it in two before I could even read what was inside. I flung the crumpled letter across the room. Clink. It was unusual for paper to make that sound. It caught my attention. For a second, it distracted me from the anger that I was feeling. I got down to investigate what it was. There, inside the torn envelope, was a small key. I picked it up and examined it. Carved on the handle, it said, Angel. So, out of curiosity, I picked up the pieces of the letter and held them together, trying to read what the key was for. To my dear angels, If you are reading this, then there is a good chance that I've passed away. You were the most perfect set of children that I've ever met. To me, you were a blessing from God. There's a reason why your old biology teacher died in a car crash and let you adorable, talented, and gorgeous children under my care. I would like to share with you that reason. Deep within the woods, outside Oaks, I resided in an old cabin. I've sent you the keys to it. May you find the special gift that I left for you. From your loving mother, Veronica Barther. That's insane, was all I ever got to say before crumpling the paper and throwing it in the trash can. Then my phone vibrated. I was shocked. It was a notification from my post. It was a comment from Emily Briggs, the little girl who had once refused to prick her fingers. Hey, I saw the letter. I'm planning to go. You coming? I wasn't sure exactly why, but I had a very bad feeling about where this was going. Bad feeling indeed. Well, if you want to see where this ends up, we'll finish this in our finale episode next time. Until then, stay scary, my wildlings. Never accept invitations from crazy, and make the most of your nights.